guys, today's lesson is going to be on the reproductive parts of the flower. So you'll need your foldable from class that we made today. If you don't have it, pause the video real quick and go get it. And you'll also need a pencil. So if you don't have that either, make sure you have your foldable and your pencil. And then come right back so we can fill it out. So we are going to begin, we're going to learn about the reproductive parts and process of the flower. So to start with, but wait, if you feel like you need to pause this video at any time because you didn't get a definition or I said something that you didn't quite understand, you can rewind me and you can start from that part again, and then you can do that as many times as you want. So feel free to pause it at any time. So let's get started with the petal. The petal is the bright and colorful leaves on the flower. As we know, because they smell so good, that they make us want to smell the flowers. So the insects want to come and smell the flowers. And this part is the petal for our foldable. So the insects come and they get pollen. But where does the pollen come from? The pollen comes from these little guys called the stamen. And the stamen is the male part of the flower, which produces the pollen. So the insects, they come and they get pollen and it gets stuck on them. And when it gets stuck on them, they put it lands on the stigma. And the stigma is this sticky little part right here in the center of the flower. So when it gets stuck right here, it starts the fertilization process. But when the pollen goes from the stamen to the stigma, it's got a name and it's called pollination. So remember, pollen is carried from a stamen to the stigma. And you need to write all this down under your flaps on your foldable. For petal, you need to write this down, and for stamen, you'll need to write this down, flip open your flip, and flip open your foldable, and write that part down under these titles. So, back to where we were. When it gets stuck on the stigma, this starts the fertilization process. And this whole thing right here is called the pistil, which is the female part of the flower, which contains the eggs. And these are the eggs. But when the eggs are fertilized, they turn into seeds. And the seeds, we all know that the seeds are the beginning of a flower. But in that seed is a little thing called an embryo, which is this little dot. So the embryo is inside of the seed. And then, last but not least, we have the leaves on our flower. And we think they might just be leaves, but they're really not. They are like a house for the flower. They hold up the whole flower. So let's go through this just one more time and make sure you have it all written down. You can stop or rewind, whatever you need to do. So let's start with the petal. We said the petal is the bright part of the flower. It's like the leaves for the flower. It smells really good. So the insects want to come and they get the pollen they get the pollen. The petals make them want to come get the pollen. But the pollen is produced by the stamens. So the stamens produce the pollen. And when the insects come get the pollen, they put it on the stigma, which is the sticky part right here in the middle of the flower. So when they get the pollen from the stamen and they put it on the stigma, it gets stuck on them. When they get it from the stamen, it gets stuck on them and they put it on the stigma, which is called pollination. But then when the pollination happens, this is called the pistil. So when pollination happens, this starts the fertilization process. So our little eggs down here in the bottom of the pistil turns into seeds, which start the process of a new plant. But in those little seeds are embryos. So we made a little dot to indicate that there's an embryo in that seed. And then last is the sepals, are the leaves which hold up the flower. They're like a house for the flower. It holds it together. So make sure that you have all this written down under your flaps for tomorrow in your foldable, because if you don't, it's not going to help you. So write these down, rewind, whatever you need to do, pause it, make sure these are all filled out and have it ready to go by the end of class tomorrow.